Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Mr. Jean-Claude Brizard. So without further ado, Jean-Claude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sheldon, thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, pleasure is mine. I'm excited for today's conversation. And the reason why I'm excited for today's conversation is because I haven't covered this before. We're going to be talking about cultural responsiveness, but from the tech side of things. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Sheldon, you have to, to know about me is my history. I'm an educator, I'm a practitioner, I was a teacher, and my first teaching job was at Rikers Island in New York City. So that was a formative set of experiences, but I was a high school principal. I was head of the high school division in New York City, 400 high schools. And of course, became a superintendent of schools in two cities, Rochester, New York, and then I led Chicago Public Schools back in 2011 and worked for the Gates Foundation for a while. But now I run this amazing organization called Digital Promise Global. We were created out of an act of Congress back in 2008 under George Bush, launched by Obama in 2011. So we're very bipartisan, nonpartisan organization. We run both sides of the aisle. A lot of our work is focused on learning sciences research, technology innovation, and practice. We bake everything in practice. Our flagship network of practitioners is the League of Innovative School Districts, about 160 school districts across the US who do a ton of work with us in learning sciences and technology. We also have a global cities network. We have a bunch of cities from Shanghai to Melbourne to Dallas to Denver who also work with us on technology and learning science innovation.
Oh, man. Y'all global. That's what's up
Oh,
there.
yes. Oh, yes.
Good. All right. Well, we're talking about technology. And specifically, we're getting into cultural responsiveness in technology. Often we talk about the importance of being responsive, making sure that the content that we're presenting to our students in our schools and things like that is relevant, things that they can really grasp and they can find important and relevant and responsive to their needs. And I want to start with a question to you as far as what does it mean to be culture responsive on the tech side of things?
It's important to go back to this idea of practice, right? Technology is a tool. It is not a replacement for anything. So if the foundation is not culturally responsive, if it does not really understand what you're trying to do, who you're trying to serve, the technology is going to respond the exact same way. That's really important. We often use the expression intelligence augmentation at Digital Promise. So, we didn't coin the expression, but it's been around for a while. So if you should get it, it's the opposite of AI, it's IA. So when you think of technology, frankly, you think about the idea of who you're serving, what you're trying to do. If it's a bunch of kids who are multilingual learners, if they're neurodiverse, and by the way, all of us are neurodiverse, right? When you think about special populations, I'm Afro-Caribbean. When I was in school, you have to understand my history, who I am as a person, my people, etc. Then the technology tool becomes one we actually use to support the instructional process or the teaching and learning process. That's important. Second, frankly, when you think about who's designing these tech tools, they have to be representative of the community in which you're looking to serve. So, which means that the technology and the tool itself becomes that kind of a multicultural, well, at least it has that kind of orientation to it. That means you need to have a diverse set of actors, developers, etc., doing that. A lot of what we produce, guide to developers, guide to practitioners, lean on this idea of inclusive innovation. We don't believe that people should go off in the corner and build a new iPhone. It should be built to respond to the needs of a community. We have a bunch of things we do. One is called the Center for Inclusive Innovation. We have a set of design processes that we actually work with developers on, including practitioners, to make sure they understand how to do this. Let me give you a couple of specific examples. We just released an acceptable use policy for AI with the help of with the US government. It was done with 10 school systems in the US. It wasn't a bunch of policy people with learning science people sitting in the corner designing this policy. We had 10 school districts that were representative of the US, different parts of the US, and they work with our team and our experts in designing this policy. This idea of centering the learner, centering the practitioner is really an important part of our work. We talk about the golden triangle: learning science research, technologists, practitioners sitting together. The practitioners push the question. It's not just the researchers. In that way, you actually get this kind of organic view of who we are serving, and to make sure that the tool that's being designed is responding to the needs of a community versus someone swooping in, dropping in with their latest tech tool and say, go ahead and use this. That way you have lasting power and it's relevant, frankly, to the community in which you're looking to serve.
Okay, so is this more than just internet access, like making sure everyone has access to the internet, or is it more specific to the software that some or platforms that folks are using and bringing that into their classrooms? Like dig in a little bit deeper as far as the specifics there.
Sheldon, it's all the above. So let me
Okay,
start with the hardware, for
okay,
example, right? We
okay,
think about someone who may have a physical disability, right? The hardware has to respond to that. Or at least there should be hardware that provide that kind of accessibility.
okay.
We do a ton of work with CAST,
Yeah.
who really are in this particular body of work. So it's important to understand that. Yes, it is about the software to make sure that the language being used in the software, that what is being used in the software is really critically important. One tool that we're beginning to work with is called Kabim. They're not yet out in the market, KIBEAM. It's a science of reading and AI tool that does not use screens. The founder is the guy who founded the Scribe Pen. He is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But what's good about what Jim is doing is that he is deliberately making sure that what he's designing is in response, yes, to the science, but also to the community. So he's getting a lot of researchers to help him understand. He's testing this from Oakland to Bronx, right, to New York City, making sure that he's pulling back on the data to understand that what he's doing is responsive to a community. Yes, it is also about the internet broadband access. Let me explain to you what that might look like. We think of whether Verizon, whatever it may be, it's just access to the internet. By the way, Verizon is one of our biggest partners in this effort. But when you think about a very specific use case, so we spent the last 2 years in New Mexico. When you look at the indigenous populations, right, you take a look at, frankly, what has or has not been done in terms of the infrastructure to support these kinds of communities, maybe in remote parts of the US, that has to be looked at and understood. During the pandemic, a lot of kids in Native American communities were giving devices, laptops, and broadband, but there was no infrastructure. These things became paperweights. One of my colleagues in Albuquerque said to us when she was asked, "How are you embracing technology?" And the question she pushed back was, how is technology embracing us? So that kind of like repositioning of a question helps you understand it's not just about Albuquerque, it's about rural parts of New Mexico as well, and the ways in which you actually respond to a community. So when you look at our digital equity framework, it talks to a lot of this kind of work. So it is all of the above, frankly.
So what do we do about the infrastructure? Because you're saying that they gave them the devices, they had internet, but it was used initially as a paperweight. So what changed or what was done in order to make this have the students be, I guess, more encouraged to utilize the devices? What changed in that process?
Well, the problem is not over. It is still a work in progress. But I can tell you what this administration, the Biden administration, has done. The Biden-Harris administration is, if you look at the infrastructure bill that was passed a couple of years ago, the purpose of which was to make sure we begin to help governors and state chiefs of education understand what to do in terms of building that. NPR had a series a couple of weeks ago that looked at how they were putting broadband access in remote parts of the US. Yes, some of it are rural white communities, some are rural Native American communities, some are rural Black communities, right? The joke the guy gave really wasn't a joke. He said they had mules pulling up poles up the mountains to lay fiber access. Because I get the contradiction here with mules pulling to build fiber. But that's the way in which we do this. We're talking about the parts of Kentucky. And the fact is that if you use your cell phone for navigation, you're going to get lost because there is no internet access in some of these remote parts of the US. But that work continues in earnest in terms of making sure there's access. There's a partner we work with in South America, in a country in Uruguay. Uruguay closed the achievement gap and they closed the digital access gap across the entire country. They made a decision that when you combine for-profit, non-profit, and government together, you can actually do this. They're a small country, but for us, it's an example of what can happen when there is will and determination to close that. I can tell you in the US, we've not done that, both in terms of urban areas, parts of Newark, parts of Seattle, parts of New York City. And there's also tremendous challenges in rural parts of the US that we still do. In the more urban areas, what you tend to get is more sort of under access, meaning you may have access to the internet, but the data is not strong enough to serve, for example, 3 or 4 children and 2 adults who are at home or 1 adult that's home. That's part of the challenge we also need to solve, not just access, but full access to powerful devices and powerful broadband.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my next question then is, because I'm thinking about my listeners, right? So the folks that are listening right now, probably educators, either K-12, and we have some higher ed representatives, and they're all could be paraprofessionals, could be teachers, principals, whoever. What kind of suggestions could you give to schools that are looking to be more responsive on their technology? Because I'm hearing a lot of things here as far as like maybe there's some areas that are rural and maybe it's a matter of internet access, or not just internet access, but at least a strength that's long enough that can sustain a household of 4 to 5 people, multiple devices going at once. But are there some things maybe that schools can do, if it's maybe some education that needs to be done, or some other, maybe partnering up with various companies? Like, what kind of suggestions do you have on that end?
There's so much here. So first of all, in a couple of weeks, we're taking about 75 school superintendents to Lindsay, California. It's a rural part of the state, the Central Valley, where they have closed the digital access. And if you go to Lindsay, what they'll tell you though is that they started out with the premise that and this is paraphrasing the late Richard Elmore out of Harvard, who said the most important relationship in education is between students, teachers, and content. What Lindsay will tell you, what many of us learned during the pandemic, it's students, teachers, parents or families, and content. It's a four-legged stool. And what they're doing in Lindsay is making sure that the technology provides continuous access to pedagogy, to continuous access to curricula. So it's a four-legged stool. The parent is a big part of this. So when you think about what to do, first of all, think about the idea of, again, teaching and learning, 24/7 access to technology and to the content, which requires a set of actions. One, to make sure that the one-to-one technology is critical, which means, and this is what Watson Russell, the FCC chairwoman, talks about, the idea of the homework gap, she calls it, which is that you can have technology in school, but the kids have to access technology at home, which is where one-to-one becomes critically important. The kids who are growing up in middle, upper income communities have access 24/7 to tech. And the tech is a tool, again. So access to technology, powerful technology, making sure that you have a refresh rate that is in play in your school district or your school, which is if you give a child a Chromebook or a Mac, you can't have them have it for 4 or 5 years. I mean, the thing becomes obsolete, right? So that's really important. Powerful access to broadband. And there are companies like Verizon, and again, big partner of ours, who do this kind of work. And the other ones do it as well too, where you can bridge that kind of support to make sure it's sufficient access to broadband. And third, really important, is making sure the educator, the classroom teacher, understand how to use technology in the classroom as a tool, not as a replacement, as a tool to support what they're trying to do. So what I ask superintendents is, what is your EdTech plan? Because very often that is relegated to the chief technology officer or chief information officer. And what I would push for anyone who's leading a school district or a CMO here sitting, listening, is make sure your technology people are sitting with your academic people and they're planning together on how to make sure it actually supports the teaching and learning process. And there's so much more, but I'll give you one last one, which is really, really important. So many of us buy technology through the social network. We call our friends and say, what are you using? EdTech efficacy. And I'm talking about privacy, I'm talking about data, is a mistake many of us are making by not looking to see what is evidence-based and make sure that the tool is doing what it claims to do. If you have special needs kids, neurodiverse kids, making sure that the tool is supporting those kids. If it claims it's going to move your math achievement, does it? So Digital Promise, ISTE, Coast, and a bunch of us just published on the web a need for us to collaborate to provide a kind of certification process for both developers and for practitioners. But the way to control the market is for procurement, for the practitioner to demand certain things. I tell soups, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. It's a supply and demand challenge, but there are mechanisms. The EdSearch Product Index is a great place to start. We try to get funding to actually make it better. It's a place to go. Filter. So I'll give you one last example, Sheldon. There are 2 major language apps in the market right now that claim to teach you how to speak a different language. One is evidence-based, one is not. The one with the greater market share has no evidence behind it. Yet
do they have more are they spending more money on marketing then? Is that why?
They're a machine in marketing, but it doesn't really work. There's no evidence behind it. So my push and my beg, because we've done the landscaping analysis, most school districts are not even asking for certification, or they lean on data privacy and maybe interoperability, but not the other stuff that really matter teaching and learning. Again, EdSearch Product Index, it's not perfect yet. We're going to make it better. Is a good place to actually start.
Okay, so speaking of starting place, what I'm hearing is if we're not doing this already, we need to be doing some sort of digital access survey, something like that for our parents, incoming families, things like that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Without question,
Mhm.
making sure your community, what your community needs. By the way, again, we have the digital equity framework on our website. It's a good tool to use. We actually designed a tool for elected officials, for state superintendents, for superintendents. They can set the conditions. And we're also seeing, by the way, because of the ESSA funding that's winding down or wound down, people are cutting programs and tools that are in heavy use by teachers and students, but don't have the engagement data in their district. I'll give you one small example. BrainPop is an example where
Yeah.
I'm seeing some districts cutting BrainPop. It's cheap, it's good, but they don't understand the engagement. Yet it's being used by a lot of teachers and families. So we beg people, please look at your engagement data before you go to the low-hanging fruit, because we're not assessing what is being done. So for example, BrainPop is now trying to educate districts. This is what's being used. 90% of your teachers are using this product. Please don't cut it. So we tend to not listen to our folks in our classrooms, and they hold the key to the solutions.
Okay, and you said you have some resources online that are available for those. Because I'm a principal now, you got me thinking like, okay, maybe I need to survey some of my students and their families that are coming in because we do a lot of work that we offer is online. Now, we talk to them about, listen, it is a requirement. You got to have internet access because you're going to take a lot of classes online in addition to maybe some stuff that's independent study. But we have that question, but I don't know if how deep we need to go into those questions. Like, should we ask more like how many people are in your household, or is your internet fast enough, or is your how current is your laptop that you have? So you do have a laptop, but is it within 5 years, or you have internet, but is it high speed, or is it so are those questions that we should be asking in addition to the basics? Like how deep should we go into these getting that assessment, getting that data that we need to know to kind of know where to go from there?
But first of all, again, the resources are on the website. But second, I would go back to what is it you try to accomplish.
Okay.
If you require substantial use of technology, you want to make sure that the tech side is sufficient and adequate to do what you want to get done in school, or what you may have in the classroom is powerful. What you may need at home may be slightly less powerful. So make sure you're doing that. The last thing I would say to you on this is our Verizon Innovative Learning Schools program, which is funded by Verizon to the tune of 40 million a year, supports 7 million kids across the US as a demonstration project. And I would say go on our website, look at those districts, see who they are, they're in proximity, reach out to them, because they have a ton of the solutions and tools that can easily, you can go visit, for example, and see and sit with the principal, sit with the superintendent or teacher, say, how are you using this in your classroom? That's one way of doing that as well too. But yes, the resources are on our website.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. One of the things that you mentioned early in our conversation was regarding who is designing those apps that we're utilizing in our classrooms. And again, as a resource, not to replace. And I'm just curious, how familiar are you on the landscape of representation
Yeah.
of the innovators that are doing these apps that are there? Because typically there's all kind of stereotypes when it comes to the representation of apps. So what are you seeing on your end?
So it's inadequate for
Okay.
sure in terms of representation. And that's important to understand.
Mhm.
But there's an easy way for buyers or consumers, again, to see when you look at these certifications on the EdSearch product index, or even just on our website, some are culturally relevant certifications. Is the product, and by the way, these folks have to go through hoops. It's a competency-based assessment to make sure that they understand if they want the certification, to demonstrate that the product is doing that. If you're looking at kids who have special needs, look at the CAST. And by the way, this is why I keep pushing EdSearch Product Index. It's managed by ISTE, but
Uh-huh.
all of us contribute to the platform, and we're going to make it even better. One of the certifications is research-based design. So you may not know the product well, but if you see the acorn on the product, you can be certain that the folks who are building it are having a learning science research orientation, and very likely is aligned to the sciences, an important piece. So again, go to the certification. It's a great proxy to look at, but I can tell you that the developer community is not yet fully representative of the broader US community. There are folks who are pushing this in, like ASU GSV, Deborah Quazzo at GSV, they're pushing on this very hard. They're investors in EdTech. I can tell you, if you go to an ASU GSV conference in San Diego, you can see the deliberate effort and purpose to make sure that what is being done is representative. But I can tell you right now, it is
Not there yet.
no,
Okay.
nowhere.
Well, Jean-Claude, I've learned a lot in this conversation. It sounds like there's a lot of work that we need to be doing, but there is work that is happening.
Yes.
I don't know how recent it is, but it does seem like there is some progress that's being made. But of course, there's always room for growth. Again, just considering our listeners, for our educators out there, what final word of advice could you provide to our listeners there?
I would say it's what I often refer to as the coherent instructional cycle. Make sure that's in play and try to figure out how you can augment the intelligence of the process. And don't forget that there is a fourth leg to the stool. It's not just your educators, your content, and your students. Your families and parents need to be centered in your discussion and conversation. And one last thing I'll say is the AI, some call it a revolution. AI has been around since 1975. It's making this conversation, this topic, even much more urgent, that we make sure that we have the kind of AI literacy, tech literacy, to make sure that we are teaching our young people what they need to know to survive present and in the future.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jean-Claude, if we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
Best ways are LinkedIn. If not, send me an email. It's jcbrizard@digitalpromise.org. Just find me. I'll go on our website and just sign up.
All right. We'll leave all the links in the show notes, folks. Once again, I have Jean-Claude here with me. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Sheldon. Great to see you.